Mananasitos colleagues, Imi na 35 na legislature in Guam is back from recess. Colleagues, when we last left last night, there was a inquiry that was asked of the main author of the amendment, and also the oversight chair of OFB also was to look at speaking with Reverend Tax to get some answers. So though Senator Marsh Titchener still had the floor, I will yield this time to Minority Leader to, would you like to yield to the question?
Sijus Masi, and good morning, colleagues. To the question that was asked regarding if Gita, and if it's going to, I think the last thing she asked when I left the hall about bond indentures. So I had the opportunity last night to speak to Teresa Garcia from Gita, who's been at Gita for many, many years. As you know, almost 15 years she's been there. So she also deals with the bond council as well. So I explained to Gita, Tina, regarding the question that was asked if it would hurt bond indentured by incorporating rental others. That is part of the list of, on the form of the GRT. According to Tina, Tina said no, this would not have any effect on bond indentures because the bill itself has a 3%, which is already obligated to the bond. As long as that is not touched, then there's no issues with that. In fact, Madam Speaker, Bill 1, when it had its public hearing for the second time, it changed. It was substituted from the first Bill 1, which did not include the 3%. So that's why a second public hearing was put into play, and incorporated in the bill was the 3% to protect the bond indenture. At that time, Gita was present at the public hearing, Ricky Hernandez, and he said, after the question proffered by the author of the bill, in the event I should raise this from 50,000 to 100,000, would it even hurt the bond indenture? And Ricky Hernandez said, absolutely not, as long as the 3% is not touched. So with that, Madam Speaker, we're not touching anything on the bond indenture by incorporating rental and others.
Thank you.
Rental others.
Senator Joseph Augustine on the question. You had a follow-up from Reverend Tax?
Yes, Madam Speaker. The follow-up I had with Ms. Daphne Sims, she'll be submitting the impact, which doesn't vary that much from what is already on the committee report. But when I spoke to Ms. Daphne, she said when it referenced to the, would there be any problems in uploading the change to include any rental option? She said it's a programming issue. It could be easily resolved so that it reflect when individuals come in to file, they'll know where to plug them. And then on the issue of, they have truly no objection at all to this bill. And they actually asked that if my colleagues can, whenever a bill is written, whatever is passed, they will follow. They don't try to follow and try to reach out and say, you might have missed this, you might have missed that. No, they just follow how the law is written, and then they just move on from there. So it's not no fault of theirs, and I thank our colleagues. We recognize there's other individuals that are not exempted, that should have been, especially the small business. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you.
And reference also to Gita. In line with our colleague, what she mentioned, I did speak to the Deputy Director. He's getting with the Director so they can write the memo that says the impact of the, as long as we don't touch the 3% and below, it would be all right. They won't have no objection to that. Anything that does, then they would object because of the bond, the bond requirements. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Marsh Titchener, you still have the floor. Senator Lee, do you have a point of information? Go ahead and state your point of information, Senator Lee.
Sijus Masi, Madam Speaker, and good morning, colleagues. I just wanted to add to what the previous speaker was mentioning. There were 2 hearings on the initial bill, Bill 1, which is now Public Law 35-13. There were 2 hearings. DRT wasn't able to attend the first one, but they did attend the second one. They provided feedback at that time about the 60-day time period after enactment, but they never mentioned any of this until, we began to process some of the applicants for Lexby and for this exemption. But our office was in contact with DRT. We have been told, and they did mention that the service rental category is not eligible as the laws currently drafted for Lexby. So I want to thank the proffer of this amendment for helping to provide clarity and making sure that all employers or all businesses are covered. It's also on their FAQ about the program. So I just wanted to inform the body that there has been some challenges by DRT in this regard, and I'm hoping that this amendment will help to further clarify that and clarify it in the law going forward, because it was never anybody's intention to exclude folks, but I'm glad that we have an opportunity to correct this now. So again, just wanted to give that information to the body and thank the mover of this amendment. Sudos Masi, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Marsh Teichner, does that answer your inquiry? You still have the floor.
Sudos Masi, Madam Speaker. And yes, it was good to hear from all three senators and to hear from Gita and DRT and the intentions of the original bill, because as we're looking at this, we're seeking, of course, to provide additional assistance. And so it was very important, I think, to make sure that this wasn't damaging anything that had already been extended. It helps us better understand some of the issues that have come along the way. So along with the other senators, I definitely support making sure that we include everybody that is intended in the small business category. So I do support the amendment. Sudos Masi for allowing me to ask those questions.
Thank you, Senator Teichner. Anyone else on the Taitagui amendment? If not, are there any objections? Any objections? No objections? Motion carries. Senator Taitagui, Minority Leader, you're still recognized on the main motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have one more amendment to the legislation, and I'm looking here now on the drive, and it was here yesterday, but I don't see it now. Could I just meet with the clerks right now to find out why it's not uploaded? I have a copy of it in my hand. And just for the sake of my colleagues, so they know what's going on. Madam Speaker, I have an amendment here on line 1, page 3, and it's section 3, effective date. This act shall be effected upon enactment, and the amendment would include and apply retroactively to January 1st, 2020. And it continues on with what's currently in the legislation and says, and shall expire 2 years from the date of enactment. Of course, the section that at which time shall return and provisions established in Public Law 35-13 was already crossed out from a prior an amendment. So this is basically just to apply retroactively to January 1st. If you give me 1 minute, I'll find out where that went. It was in here yesterday. Thank you.
Just a moment's recess. 35th Guam Legislature is back from recess. Minority Leader,
Sijus Mase, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it was just a matter of refreshing my computer. My colleagues is located on FA 323 TTL1P3. And as I mentioned earlier, it's to apply retroactively to January 1st, 2020, and shall expire 2 years from the date of enactment. Madam Speaker, as it was mentioned earlier, that there was no intention to leave certain people out from this opportunity that was provided first in Public Law 35-13, and now with this bill, Bill 323, to provide the relief needed, so desperately needed by the small businesses. We were in a crisis that began in March of this year. So if you look at the fiscal year for those filing taxes, you starting in January, February, and then March, you're looking at about 2.5 months of some kind of businesses as normal. But once we went into lockdown, Madam Speaker, which began around the middle of March, there was no business, no activity, nothing going on. And to this day, even though we are slowly going into a process of trying to have some kind of normalcy, we know that businesses will take a lot longer to recover from this crisis. And this body is doing everything it can to help the people of Guam, the community. Because when you have jobs, when you have businesses, it creates jobs for individuals. And right now, we know what our unemployment looks like today. With people out of jobs, and you know that the businesses are not up and going either. And some businesses, at this point, with no relief, then it makes it very difficult for them to get back into business. Right now, there's some projects out there that are helping these small businesses, but I think these need something for the long run. When you open a business, you're making a sacrifice. You're sacrificing a mortgage on your home. You're working 24/7. Having a small business is very difficult. So what we can do is provide them some kind of relief. Now, from March 16th up to this day, you have to ask yourself, well, what kind of taxes are they filing right now? Probably nothing at this point because they're not making anything. So what we can do is give them a break from January until the middle of March. That's 2.5 months. It's not a whole lot. But it's something that can help them get back on their feet again, and to know that for 2 years they're going to have this kind of break. Let's show the business community out there that provides jobs for our people that we're doing our best to help them. And that means going back to January of this year, retroactively, to give them that break. And that's what this body can do for them. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
on the amendment, anyone wishing to speak? If not, is there an objection? Here. Vice Speaker, would you like to speak on the amendment?
Madam Speaker, can you just give us a little bit more time to pull up the amendment? I'm sorry. This is a different amendment, right?
Yes, it is. It
So
is
can
the
you-
amendment that
can you-
we started.
Can you just give us, give us some time to pull up the amendment?
I'll
Thank
have
you.
you get time to pull the amendment up. I'll recognize Senator Lee.
Sujos
Do
Masi,
you have a
Madam
point
Speaker.
on the
Yes,
amendment?
if the proffer of the amendment could just repeat the title as it's found in our drive, so we can all be looking at the same one.
Thank you, Senator. If you can, Minority Leader,
No problem. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, the amendment is FA 323 TTL1P3. And the amendment reads, line 1, page 3, section 3, effective date. This act shall be effected upon enactment and apply retroactively to July 1st, 2020. And so the amendment is to and apply retroactively to July 1st, 2020. And shall expire 2 years from the date of enactment.
anyone else wishing to speak on the amendment? Vice Speaker, you're recognized.
Sijus Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this amendment. There has been several opinion editorials written really trying to create a divisive mentality with the legislature only helping one part of our workforce. And so I appreciate this amendment. It shows that we stand also with our business community. It shows that we are looking for solutions and avenues to help our local businesses, especially because of the impact of COVID. We see a decline in the small businesses, not only on Guam, but across the nation. And also, Madam Speaker, what this amendment will do is it will cause the government to start streamlining its processes. And so hopefully that we can look forward and see how we can streamline some areas of our government and perhaps some agencies that haven't really been functioning to its full speed, that it should be functioning and implementing certain things, certain missions and visions to help the community. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Vice Speaker. Anyone else on the amendment? Senator Therese Terlaye on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I mean, the amendment by itself seems, great. Let's give them a tax break retroactive to January, but that's 5 months of revenue, and I'm looking at the CRER, and in the April report, or as of April, the report we received in May, shows that we had a $9 million loss in the BPT. And so this bill predicts an additional $5 million loss in BPT for, for the exemptions granted here. So I'm just curious what that additional 5 months is going to add on to it. Would it be like half of the 5 million, another 2 or 3? And I guess I'm just curious how we offset these losses to BPT. If we are counting on them, or we counted on them from January through May, and maybe we've spent them, I'm just curious how we offset that going forward. Or whether the government's required then to issue refund checks or something. I think giving cash back might be a problem for them at this point, as opposed to just not receiving the income going forward. I don't know, but I'm just raising those concerns. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Therese. Anyone else on the amendment? Senator Joseph Augustine, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this amendment and on the concern of any of our colleagues that deals with what they do at revenue and tax. If they need to give credit, they'll give credit when credit is due. Normally, whenever the government owes, when it deals with DRT, they give you credit going forward. They don't go backwards and start collecting. And in reference to one of my colleagues' statements that it's another way of streamlining the government. We can't take away your purse, but I tell you what, we can tell you how much you're going to put in your purse. And that's our job. And I have no problem with that one. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Augustine. Anyone else on the amendment? If there's no objections, motion carries. Anyone else on the main motion on 323? Senator Jim Moylan, I will recognize you at this time.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate all the efforts put forth and from the author of the bill, and I do like the bill, and I wish to offer an amendment to strengthen the bill as well. I request that I move into my amendment, Madam Speaker, please.
You have an amendment to proffer amendment, Senator Jim. If you can go ahead and read the the,
Yes, Madam Speaker. The amendment can be found, it's numbered FA 323 JCM P2. If I can offer just a few minutes to, so my
yes,
colleagues can
I will,
find.
Senator, does everybody have that amendment in front of them?
So it's FA 323 JCM P2. Madam Speaker, request to read the amendment, please.
Yes, you can read the amendment now.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So the amendment to Bill 323-35 is referenced to line on page 2 to amend the bill to read Section 2, a new subsection 203.3 is hereby added to Article 2 of Chapter 26, Title 11, Guam Code, annotated to read. Subsection 26203.3, temporarily limited exception for certain small businesses. So notwithstanding any provision of law, the taxes levied under this article in excess of those generated from the 3% of the gross proceeds of business privilege tax reference to subsection 26202 shall not apply to the first $550,000 earned or received per tax year by any person or real property, rentals, retailers, service income, commission income, license insurance premium, and/or farming, whose gross annual income in excess of $50,000, but not more than $500,000 during the most recent tax year provided. However, that such persons shall be fully subject to the 3% of the gross proceeds of the business privilege tax reference in subsection 26202, subject to the existing requirements and exceptions referenced elsewhere in this article. The exceptions set forth in this section shall apply annually, commencing on the first day of the month of the new tax year based on the gross annual income of a person during the most recent year, and shall end on the last day of the last month of the same tax year. And I'd like to further clarify what the amendment is actually doing. So Bill 323, as proposed, will provide a business with a maximum qualifying threshold of $500,000. And that's to realize a savings for the small businesses of $5,000 annually, Madam Speaker. Now, this amendment would allow the same businesses to realize an annual savings of $10,000. So we're basically allowing them more opportunity to get started again. Now, many of these businesses, as we know, were shut down for at least 2 months. And these same businesses, there are a number of them that will probably not reopen. And while these that are struggling to reopen, they're able to defer some of their payments, as we know, such as their utilities and their tax obligations and other debts. But at some point, they're going to have to catch up. And how are they going to do that? You know, some entities have, we know, availed to the PPP program, which is designed to help those who lost their jobs. And that's wonderful. It's a great thing. It's helpful. And some micro businesses availed to the program provided by GITA. But it was limited in terms of payments. So I've spoken to business organizations and who heartily support this amendment, and I've spoken to the author of the bill as well, and I've provided a letter also from the Guam Association of Realtors. And just to highlight something they say that the real estate industry is also suffering. And real estate agents, as we know, are independent contractors. They're business owners too. And there's no denying that they feel the island is suffering during this pandemic. So measures like these will assist business communities in a great time, and it's greatly appreciated. We also have a letter from the Guam Korean Chamber of Commerce as well, and they're hoping for this amendment, it will be a great assistance for them, because it will allow the small business to survive long enough to find their bearings again after we come through this situation, because it's so critical that the small businesses are our backbone, and they need to survive. So by increasing the chances of success, by releasing the tax burden up to $500,000, they're given a better chance for businesses to continue to move forward. Because in the long run, they realize and believe that this is the advantage for government of Guam, as it foregoes just a short-term tax revenue for a long-term tax revenue stream from the small businesses. And we understand that this clause will sunset. So they're really pleading for us to please help us out more. So I hope to get the support of the body on this amendment, and remember the 10,000 savings, that's the highest in the savings an entity can attain. We're not saying all these small businesses will be able to do this, and that's reflective of 12 months. I mean, if we divide that up per month, that's just $800 per month. That's probably not even their power bill. But a little something would help. And these monies are for utilities and for taxes, and they lost their income, they got to start over with their inventory, and much, much more. So I'm requesting therefore for my colleagues to kindly support this amendment. It would strengthen the bill, and it would help a lot more small businesses. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Senator Moylan, thank you very much. If I may, just so that we're correct, because I hear you speaking about the 500,000 and not the 550,000. So if you can just make that motion to delete that 50, please, before I start discussion on it.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to delete the 50, and the amount is 500,000. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On that motion, without any objection? On the 50 or on the technical? Yeah, so he has an amendment to the amendment to, instead of looking at 550,000, he meant to put 500,000. So he's going to delete the word 50 on the third line. On that motion, on that amendment, without any objection, motion carries. On the amendment as amended, Senator Marsh-Titano, I will recognize you.
Suduas Masi, Madam Speaker. This is really just a question about the order of business. Yesterday, we very clearly crossed out this entire section, and so I'm confused as to why we're amending a section that we crossed out. So this is just, like I said, the order.
Senator Marsh-Titano, I will confer with clerks, and I will get right back. A moment's recess. The 35th Guam Legislature is back from recess. Senator Marsh-Titano, based on the clerk's update, the amendment is in order. It includes all the amendments that were up to date as of today, which is inclusive of what he wants to do with this amendment.
Are you saying that we're voting to put the amendment back in? Because it was entirely crossed out by an amendment yesterday, Section 2, and we replaced it with Section 3, which talked about temporary limited exceptions.
I will take a moment's recess just to confirm
Yeah,
with the
I
author
just
of
want
the
to make sure we're on the
legislation.
right track here.
Emina 35 en la legislatura en Guam is back from recess. Senator Kelly Marsh Taichino, I still recognize you on the amendment.
Sujuas Maasi, Madam Speaker. And I appreciate being able to ask the questions because the sections, the subsections 26203.2 and subsection 26203.3 have the potential of very different consequences. And so I was able to find an updated version of the amendment. Yesterday's amendment was in the point 2 subsection, and today's amendment that has been updated is in the point 3. So it was very important to be able to make sure that it was indeed in that correct place. So the one question that I still have, and just wanting to, again, make sure that everything's in place so that when we're voting on the amendment, we understand its full implications. And just wanting to make sure that with this placement, that it will indeed be sunsetting at the intended period of time. So if I can hear from the author of the amendment, if that's his understanding, that by placing it here, it is his intention that this is going to indeed sunset as stated elsewhere in the bill.
Thank you, Senator Taichino. Senator Jim Moylan, would you like to yield?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the question. Yes, this, it as the original bill is, and with the future or the prior amendments, that all applies. So the sunset all applies to this amendment. The answer to the question is yes. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. Senator Marsh Taichino.
Sujuas Masi, Madam Speaker, and yes, I appreciate the clarity of understanding that we're talking about something that will sunset, so that clarification was important. Sujuas Masi.
Thank you. Senator Mary Torres on the amendment. Okay. Anyone else on the Jim Moylan amendment? Senator Therese Terlahi, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to inquire as to, we have a fiscal note on the original bill, and that was a $5 million impact. And I wanted to know if we could get an updated amount for this. This amendment seems to double that, or, my calculations are it would be a total of $11 million that this new bill would impact the government's revenue on BPT. And I just want to know if that's the same calculation that OFB might have or BBMR. We don't have that in front of us right now, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Therese Terlahi. To the author of the bill, Senator San Agustin, would you like to yield?
Yes, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, to ask OFB right now and BBMR to give an update, I would have to follow in sequence pretty much of what my colleague has brought up, and that if the author of the amendment would just explain it all, what the estimated amount is, maybe we can have a warm and fuzzy feeling on it, Madam
Thank
Speaker.
you, Senator San Agustin. Senator Moylan, would you like to yield to Senator Therese Terlahi's inquiry?
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the question. We can basically say the savings as the bill is proposed would be $5,000. With the same qualifying threshold from the 50,001 up to $500,000, that remains the same. The amendment applies now from a discount from $250,000 to $500,000. So thereby, the savings for the small business goes from $5,000 to $10,000, so basically doubling. That's with the assumption on BBMR's fiscal note that the current businesses all remain. And that's with the assumption that they're going to make the same amount of money that they were before COVID. But we know from this loss of income and loss of employees and that their businesses in the media have already reported they've decided not to reopen. And then for those that take the risk and do reopen, like some coffee shops that said no thank you, small retailers said no thank you, some longtime businesses said I'm ready to retire. But for those businesses that are willing to open, where is their customer base going to come from? Will they still see, based on their service or their product that they provide, the same amount of business that they project? Or was their businesses based on tourism? And for these small businesses, we know that are based on tourism, they're projecting a couple of years before we were back in our heyday with over 80% of occupancy. To answering the question, basically double it. But is that going to be the accurate projection? I don't believe so. But I think the main part is, without giving these businesses who are willing to sacrifice and come back a greater opportunity and a purpose to, then we can project not a greater loss. And I think our survival is based on these small businesses coming back strong, and this will be an opportunity for them to survive. It doesn't mean that they're going to make it. And I think only a small percentage will be able to get to that maximum level. You know, even some of our GITA loan approvals, you know, we're talking about small businesses that qualify for that loan of getting $50, or some even only $200, because they're that small. So to assume that all these small businesses will qualify at the 500,000 threshold, it's a far stretch. And at this time, when we're hoping tourism will come back, even if we open up tomorrow, the countries that we cater to, they're not open to send the tourists our way. So I think this amendment, we're really trying to enforce to our small businesses that, you know, please reopen. And we want to give you the best opportunity to do so. And with the entrepreneurship, maybe they would strive to do that. So thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. Senator Regine, did you have a point of information or clarification? She raised her hand.
Yes, Madam Speaker, just I guess an additional point of inquiry to emphasize maybe the question that was proffered by the good senator from Jotnia. I believe it was a question regarding the impact to government. And I don't believe that was answered by the proffer of this amendment. I think that we all understand what the attempt of this amendment is, what the attempt is to do, and the attempt of this bill is to provide relief to small businesses. The attempt of this amendment, notches it up and brings it up a little bit further, but in order for this body to move forward fiscally responsibly, we need to be well aware of, with updated information from BBMR, from OFB, with regard to the initial inquiry again by the good senator from Jotnia, with regard to the impact of this amendment to government. And so I just restate the inquiry. What would this impact be to government? What is the total cost given the previous amendment, where we're now including people that were previously not included? What is the impact to government with regard to retroactively including some of these people? We don't have those answers, Madam Speaker, and I think it's irresponsible for us to move forward without an idea of the total cost and where that money would come from. Because I'm all for giving additional money to our small businesses. That was the intent of the initial bill. But we really need to be very careful about how we're moving forward, and so we need to be able to have that information from our government entities, from BBMR and from OFB, Madam Speaker.
Senator Lee, if I may, thank you. Senator Therese, You still had the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to those who yielded. Yeah, I share the concerns of the previous speaker, obviously. I think it is really, I mean, obviously, it's the easy part that we want to give a tax break. For those of us who did not support the BPT increase, last term, it makes sense. Then, cut it now when they really need it. Cut it for everyone, So we're doing it selectively for some businesses, but that's the easy part, Madam Speaker. The hard part has always been what's on the other side. We're doing it for fiscal year 2020. We're starting it immediately. That means our budget, if it wasn't already, is pretty much shot, right? By at least 11 million from this bill, perhaps 11 million from the other bill that we talked about earlier this session, perhaps 10 million from what we're going to talk about going forward in this session. That's 30 million. That's half of the increase in the BPT. I mean, if we had that kind of money to give away, I'm the happiest person to do that. But the hard part is the other side. It's we're either going to have to cut more, and just make it make sense. So I have no objection to the amendment, and I have no objection to helping small businesses. I have concerns, very much concerns, that we are doing this for fiscal year 2020 without adjusting fiscal year 2020 expenditures. We have already been told by OFB that the government of Guam, or the administration needs to redo its revenue projections for FY21. It needs to perhaps redo its budget for FY20 because of the losses that are shown. Now, BBMR tells us that from the CARES money that's coming through, we may not see any losses. And I don't know. Every state across the nation says huge revenue losses. Our actual losses, they show, but they use some formula to say otherwise. So I'm concerned that we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. When we cut revenues, we adjust the revenue. We should adjust expenditures. I mean, I don't want to say let's help. I don't know. We just have to balance. We're all trying to do a balancing act here. We're trying to take care of businesses, of course, people who need food, of course, employees who worked, of course, to make sure that retirees have health insurance and that we don't overexpend and end up with nothing, we're not able to pay our bills. That's just it. So if, I guess the sponsor of the bill is the OFB chair, and, the fiscal note says that we are going to be impacted, and, now we can estimate about 11 million. I'm just concerned that we're not seeing the other side of that equation. I mean, is it going to be, we've already been told there was not $11 million for the hospital's roof or for any CIP, capital improvement projects for the hospital at all in fiscal year 2020. And now with the reduction in revenue, it's just concerning, Madam Speaker. So that's part of our job here. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Therese. Anyone else on the amendment? Senator Will Castro, I will recognize you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of Senator Moylan's amendment, and I do want to publicly acknowledge and thank him for leading off on the right foot, which is asking what the impact is on the private sector community. I think for too long already we've been asking ourselves what the impact on Gov Guam would be, and we have a pretty good answer. But my previous colleague, what prompted me to speak at Masquehelo is the fact that the question was stated, what are we doing in terms of controlling government revenue? This is a question we were supposed to be asking, and many of us have asked since 2018. What is it that we're supposed to have been doing to address the increase in the BPT? And what about the issue of the increase in the real property tax? What about the issue last fall when there were murmurings about a potential stated uptick in revenues, unanticipated government revenues? Yeah, surely across the nation, the entire community is suffering in terms of government revenues. Enter the CARES Act. But what are we doing to stimulate the economy? What are we doing to make good to the private sector to return the money that we took in order to subsidize government operations a few years ago? We were supposed to have held the line that Governor Calvo had established in the sand by not growing this government, by cutting non-essential services. And here we are with this opportunity to save some of these micro businesses that make about $500,000 or less, with a potential financial impact of $11.5 million after we took over $70 to $80 million from the private sector. I mean, this upcoming fiscal year budget is going to be a battle because we're going to ask those questions. But let's not wait for each agency to come forward, because I don't want to get into the business of prioritizing for the executive branch what exactly needs to be done and how to control or cut costs, whether it's through attrition or zeroing out entire services that are not essential. If it's not for the private sector, Madam Speaker, you don't have a Gov Guam. And I'm pro Gov Guam. I served in the government as a director. I served as a teacher. I served as a program coordinator. So I've been in the trenches with these classified working men and women. But that doesn't mean we sacrifice everything else along the way in this time of crisis. I know people who cannot open their businesses again. Senator Moylan's attempt to just open it up a little bit more. And we're not talking about monolithic establishments that have been here for decades that make posted hundreds of millions or deca millions. We're talking about these organizations that gross under the stated amount. These are the micro businesses that actually pay people to come to work as well. Or when someone doesn't come to work, Madam Speaker, they got to go do it themselves. Now, I'm not asking anyone specifically in the room, but if you just ask yourself, well, there was a pandemic in PCOR 1, were you sitting at home comfortable receiving a check while the rest of those folks who sold hamburgers or did whatever they did to survive had no form of revenue? In my street alone, thank God, I know the families who have retirees, service-connected disability income, because they can feed their children and their children's children, Madam Speaker. But I'm saying, come on, I don't take exception if you just give this reprieve up to December this coming year, and I have no problems with the retro. Certainly we can come back when everything is quote-unquote hunky-dory again, everybody's happy. But right now, this conversation is going down the wrong path when you're focusing primarily on the government of Guam. I believe in maintaining the workforce that we have. I am not advocating for furloughs. I am certainly not asking anybody to be terminated. My God, we've all got to make certain sacrifices, Madam Speaker, sacrifices. And with that said, I thank you, Senator Moylan and Senator Taitagui, my colleagues, for taking the bold step forward, as unpopular as it would be with the administration. I stand with you to get these businesses back online so we can start to get Guam working. And that's it. That's my statement. And I don't take exception on a personal level to the prior speaker. I raise the issue so that we can continue to ask that question as we proceed with the budget formulation for FY21, because we should have been asking that since the day we passed the taxes and all things were made stable, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Castro. Anyone else on the Moylan Amendment? Senator Regine Biscoli, I will acknowledge you at this time.
Madam Speaker, and I just proffered this question to the mover of this amendment.
Please state your question.
What is the cost? Based on the previous amendment that just passed, it's a very simple question. How much will this cost us? In our own families, when my child decides that, she wants a bike, maybe we sit down as a family, we decide, oh, there's a used bike for sale. Our family can afford it. It costs $100. This is what we agree that we can afford. And then your kid comes back to you and says, no, Mom, I want the brand new bike. It's going to cost $250. That's the first question that you ask. You want the brand new bike? Well, what's it going to cost? So it's a very simple thing. We don't need to be tearing at each other. We're just asking the simple question, the first question that pops up in everybody's mind. That's a great idea. How much is it going to cost us, and can we afford it? That's it.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Moylan, would you like to yield?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the question. Yes, I would like to yield. To keep it simple, as expressed, it is. Simple answer, at most, it would double. But if we do nothing, like today, it's not. And probably the revenue won't even increase at all, as projected either. We got deferred on paying our taxes. You got deferred on a whole bunch of things because people don't have jobs. So if we want to say we're going to put everybody back into business starting July 1, it would cost us double if that business opens its doors and generates the revenue it used to. Well, but good luck with that. Even if they're willing to open their doors, as the previous speaker had mentioned. We're talking about businesses that have the biggest question. Why am I staying in business on Guam? Why don't I just take my losses and close up? I can do something else. Is that what we want to do, or do we want to emphasize to the business, the small business, the mom and pops that are here through typhoons and earthquakes and whatever the next pandemic is, who have their roots here, who want to establish and pass it on to further their business and make it grow if possible, or just to maintain what they presently have? Do we believe that they're going to all reach that $500,000 threshold and get $10,000 in a savings? My goodness, if that happened, the GRT will be in a much, our general fund will be in a much better place. But by not doing just give, right? It's not a handout. Okay, we're handing this up. We're giving the opportunity for businesses that want to open to open. We're saying we are business ready and business friendly. We're trying to do everything we can to get government services back and practice this distancing and so forth, so they can provide for the small businesses. So to make it simple, as the question was asked, double it. And if they believe that will happen, okay, great. But thank you, Madam Speaker. I hope that answers the question.
Senator Lee, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What would double? What is the dollar amount? That's my question to the proffer of this amendment. And if the mover doesn't know, then we should say that. We should be upfront and say we don't have that information, we don't have that dollar amount.
Senator Mary Torres, do you have a point?
Yeah, I just following up on the discussion, I see where there's a doubling, but in fact, if you look at the temporary limited exemption under 26203.3, it originally started in the main section 26203.2. It started at $100,000, and then it was raised to $250,000. What this proffers of this amendment is doing is taking that now and making it the cap $500,000. So I just want everybody to be clear that what we're doing is, when the bill was heard at the public hearing and testimony was received, it was on the idea that you're going to give temporary relief now for 2 years, now retroactive to January 2020, going from a $100,000 cap. The public hearing, it was $250,000. What we're doing today is we're increasing that 5 times. So, let's just be clear about what we're talking about. We're going from $100,000 to $500,000. But the question I have to the author, and I don't object to that. It'd be great if we didn't have to pay taxes at all right now. I mean, that ideally is where we would want to be. But if 500,000 is unrealistic, then why is 500,000 the cap that you're proposing? Could there be a compromise amount? Because we went from 100,000 to 250. Now we're going from 100,000 to 500,000. So if 500,000 is not going to be realized, was there any thought to an amount that was more realistic, that then would be applied to a real situation as opposed to something that sounds quite generous? So the question is about the threshold. How did we arrive at $500,000? Because we went from now 100,000 to 500,000, which is more than double.
Senator Moylan, would you like to yield?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, I would like to yield, and thank you for the questions. Basically, to answer it directly, okay, the present bill of 323 at the 250,000. Now the businesses are still paying taxes on it. Okay, they're just getting a 2% discount. Our GRT forever at 5%, so you're still paying 3% to satisfy what Gita wanted as well. So what does that equal? $5,000 if you reach 250. $5,000. You know, my rent probably at the small business is a couple of $1,000s, depending if I'm in Tumon or if I'm in Agana. It depends on your total square footage, right, as well. $5,000 divided by a month, that's $416. I can anticipate if I had for refrigeration, my power bill for my small business would be over $1,000. So why double it? Well, that comes out to $10,000 per month. That's $10,000 per year. And again, I'm still paying my 3%. And that comes out, that $10,000 per year is $833. That sounds more reasonable to help a small business open their doors again until finally we sunset this. But I recall the previous question as well. You know, BBMR said it's going to cost for 323 an impact, I believe, of 6.2 million. So double it, you know, your max, you're looking at 11, close to 12. Okay. Realistically, well, if we all put them back in, so that's great. And if you want to add the other amendment and see where that adds up, that's great. But the emphasis, again, is to help the small business. They are our backbones. They are what we need for the government to generate our income. Our budget is based on these things, to include employee taxes, right? If you happen to reach the $500,000 threshold, I mean, with $10,000, you can get maybe one part-time guy. It's helpful. That's the reason. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. Senator Torres, Mary Torres, you still have the floor.
I'll yield to my other colleagues, Madam Speaker.
Senator Lee, do you have a point of information?
So just Masi, Madam Speaker, I just want to kind of revisit the points that I was attempting to make earlier, and just for the information for the body, when we were discussing this as Bill 1, which is now Public Law 35-13, one of the considerations that we had was this idea of the threshold, right? Where initially it was, as the previous speaker had mentioned, it was at $100,000. And then there was an amendment to increase it to $250,000. So when you do that, Madam Speaker, when you make an increase, you look at the number of businesses in our community that make $250,000 or less in a year. The number of businesses that make $500,000 or less in a year, the numbers of those businesses in our community is not double. The amount that they make is double. So we could have the number of businesses that make $250,000 or less in our community. Let's say, just for example, maybe there are 500 of those businesses. That doesn't mean that when you go up to $500,000 or less, it's 1,000 businesses. It doesn't make sense to me. And so I ask again, the mover of the amendment, what would the cost be? Because double doesn't make sense.
I'm going to approach that as a question again, Madam Senator. Senator Moylan, would you like to restate your answer based on the inquiry that was asked by Senator Lee?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the question. I'll do my best. So the Bill 323, the qualifying threshold, and I'll reiterate, the law that we're amending, the qualifying threshold is from $501,000 to $250,000. And then and you get a discount on the first $100,000, that 2% discount. And then the Bill 323, to amend the law, the qualifying threshold, you're a small business making starting at $50,001 to $500,000. And the discount amount is on the first $250,000. The amendment proposed is using the same threshold, the qualifying threshold, those businesses, the same qualifying threshold as Bill 323. Only those businesses within 50,001 to 500,000. So the pool of businesses are the same as Bill 323. We're just increasing the discount amount. You can make up to $500,000 and get that 2% discount, still paying your 3%. So the qualifying threshold is, I'm hoping what I'm expressing clearly, qualifying threshold means these businesses that make starting at $50,001 up to $500,000. Just those guys. Not anybody making $501,000. They're out of the picture. So it's the same group of people we're focused on, the same qualifying threshold, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator Lee, you still have the floor.
Suzos Masi, Madam Speaker, and if I could just ask a clarifying question then to the mover of this amendment. Does this amendment change the universe of businesses that we're looking at? Does it change it in any way?
Thank you, Senator. Senator Moylan, would you like to yield to that question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Okay, the term universe, I didn't read my horoscope, so I'm trying to figure out where. Can please request to clarify the question, Madam Speaker?
I will ask the good senator from Tamuning to restate the question.
With pleasure, Madam Speaker. So does this amendment that is being proffered expand the number of businesses that will qualify?
You can speak into them.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the clarification.
The answer is yes.
Okay, today, right, or rather with Bill 323, the qualifying threshold is 50,001 up to 500,000. Today, I don't know how many businesses are still within this bracket. Today, my amendment is still within that same bracket. How many have renewed their license or plan to renew their license? How many? I can't say, Madam Speaker. Right? There's no way I can. How can you project when we don't know who's going to open or close? How can we project who's interested in starting a new business or not? How can we project? Only if you're an existing business today, 50,001 up to $500,000. And those businesses may not be open today, or will they even wish to be open when we're through the pandemic?
So, Senator,
Yes, Madam
would that
Speaker.
question based on Senator Lee, would that be a yes or a no? Would it change? Would it increase? Is that a yes or a no?
I'm sure there will be a change, Madam Speaker. Yes.
Senator Lee, does that suffice? You still have the floor.
I rest my case, Madam Speaker. Sizos Masi.
Anyone else on the Moylan amendment? Senator Clint Rigel, you're recognized on the amendment by Senator Jim Moylan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think these questions that have been brought up by my colleagues raise attention to the point that fiscal note, I think, is really needed for this particular amendment. Fiscal notes are a requirement of all bills that are introduced that have a fiscal impact, and it's apparent that this amendment does have a fiscal impact, and it's also apparent that the author of the amendment is unclear as to the exact amount of the fiscal impact, which again necessitates a fiscal note. So because there is no fiscal note for this amendment, Madam Speaker, I will have to object to this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Rigel. On the amendment, anyone else wishing to speak? Minority Leader, I will recognize you.
Sizos Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, what this amendment does, it does increase the pool of those that will qualify. If you remember during the public hearing that we had for this bill, it was Carlos Camacho that came and testified in favor of this legislation. But he also mentioned that the amount that's going to help businesses are probably going to be the canteen trucks, and that's about the extent of it. Now, what this amendment does is it allows for other businesses besides the canteen trucks because it's such a low amount. We're sitting here today trying to give a hand up to these businesses, not a hand out, but a hand up. When we're talking about the amount that it's going to affect the general fund, well, if you ask me, from March until now, there is no taxes that are being filed because there are no businesses that are being opened right now. So how can it be that there's going to be a detriment into the taxes for 2020 this year when businesses are closed? This is an opportunity to give hope to businesses, to open up, to stay open. Don't pack up and leave. This body, this legislature, this government is doing everything it can right now to keep them afloat. And that's what this bill is going to do. Now, as far as a fiscal note, yeah, maybe that might affect 2021. But we're discussing budget for 2021 right now, and we can take that into consideration for the next year. So when we go to budget, Office of OFB, if this bill should pass, they will be prepared to make those adjustments. But really, $6 million, right, in a good year when there's no COVID or no crisis or when businesses are forced to close their door. That's in a good year. You're looking at $550,000 a month from the 6.6 million in a good year. We're not even seeing that. We're discussing finances here when there's not even taxes that are being filed. It's about a hand up to these businesses. We don't need to disgrace them by giving them a handout. We need to do our part. And that's to give these guys hope to stay open, to stay on Guam. There is no major adjustment to finances right now because right now we're in crisis. Thank God we've got some federal funds coming in. It'll probably help keep afloat this government. And hopefully it's going to keep afloat some of these businesses. But they also need to know that we're doing our part as well. So this is a chance for us to do our part. This is a chance for us to support not just the canteen trucks, but other businesses out there. Because it was said, even during the public hearing by Carlos Camacho, which we all respect as a business individual, this bill would help canteen trucks. where there are more businesses on this island than canteen trucks. I stand in full support of this. And then next year in the FY 2021, we will adjust our budget to assist businesses that provide jobs for our people, that put money into the government of Guam in paying their taxes. But if we don't, nobody's going to pay taxes. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Minority Leader. On the Moylan amendment, those that haven't spoke yet, do you wish to speak at this time? On the amendment, Senator Marsh, you did speak on the amendment. Senator Therese, you did speak on the amendment. Anybody else wishing to speak? Senator Joe San Agustin.
Madam Speaker, just for point of information,
Please state your point.
I just want to make sure that our colleagues understand that this bill, as amended now with the amendments, it impacts this fiscal year. It also impacts 2021. I'm in full support in keeping business in business, okay? That's number one. Number two, like the other colleagues have mentioned, what is the true impact? What is the number of businesses we're looking at? Yes, Mr. Carlos Camacho mentioned canteen trucks. He also didn't mention the other small businesses that exist, and he's very familiar with them. But he only threw that statement out as such. So I wouldn't take it to heart that he was only referring to canteen trucks. There are mom and pop stores that are under the 500,000. So if we want to follow in line with what everybody mentioned, the 2.2, if you follow the fiscal note, we're looking at impact about 20 million. Okay, understood, Madam Speaker. My colleagues mentioned we haven't had a good year. Until we recover, we're never going to have a good year. The issue of this bill was to stick with 250 and 500. To double it, I would ask that we'd have to recess and just try to get some more information so we can move on this bill. Because this is only a small part. I think that's the only amendment left. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to request that we go to recess and return back at 1400.
On that motion, we are in recess till 2 o'clock this afternoon.